we're going to look at how we can leverage the three different components of the category of information to, within the reality that we are experiencing, make better decisions that move us closer to the meaning or purpose that we have. So the model that I have built starts with this fundamental idea that there is this thing called existence that operates on the information side of it through the process of knowing. So a brief way to say it is that existence knows information. There is the existence, which is the brackets. There is the knowing, which is identified by the arrow. There is the information, which is the circle, which in this context is all of the content that exists within reality instantaneously and forever. And then from here, we recognize that we cannot describe the first two components of this statement, existence and knowing. So we cannot describe with language what it means or what it actually is to exist. And we also cannot describe with language or words what the relationship between the existence and the information that is existing actually is. We cannot describe the knowing component of my description, but we can describe the information, because the information is in essence information about other information. If there is some category of information that is possible to exist within reality, then there is some definition of what that category of information actually is. And then finally, we have to ask, does that category of information actually exist within reality? Although it could be possible to exist, and from that possibility there is a function arising, we actually don't ever see that category of information existing within reality. So from those descriptions, we choose more intuitive words to describe them. We use information to encompass, from our subjective perspective, this idea that there are categories of information that have a possibility of existing within reality. If it's not possible for a category to exist, then it doesn't. But if it is possible for a category to exist, or we have a high amount of certainty of information existing, then we can say that there is necessarily some function that would arise out of the possibility of that information existing. If there is a possibility of that information existing, and therefore there is a function arising out of that, we have to then ask ourselves, is it actually instantiated within the content of existence? And so that's where we draw this word action from. There is information that has some function, and if instantiated in reality, it has some action that arises out of the function because it's possible to exist. Now we're going to apply these three ideas to what it means to be human and how we make decisions day in and day out, or moment to moment, as a human being. We are going to disregard the metaphysical or the objective perspective, quote unquote, that existence itself has about the content that exists inside of it. Rather, we're going to take the perspective of being a limited and subjective agent existing through the content of existence. So essentially what we're saying is that we are going to describe information from the first person perspective. We're going to change the three terms that I used that apply better to the metaphysical or objective description about reality, and instead use words that are more commonplace or more useful from the human or first person perspective. So now we're going to say that the first constituent part of the category of information that is required, that we described previously as simply information, is now going to become the term honesty. What honesty is in this context is the predictiveness and quantity of information that we have accessible to us at any particular moment as we are trying to make any kind of decision. Then we had this concept of function, which was the definition of any category of information that exists. And so we're going to change the word function to value. So that is to say, it is the strategy and principles that we are using to apply any information that we have within our head. And then finally, action is this idea that although there is a possibility that something could exist, and therefore there is a function of that thing that is existing, we still have to say that it actually exists or doesn't exist. Action, in this context, becomes strength from our first person human perspective. So that is to say, it is a description about the capability and willingness for us to act on the information based upon the values. So in the exact same way, information necessitates a function, honesty, or the information and quantity of that information inside of our brain constructs or provides us a value system that we then use to operate on the other pieces of information that we have within our head. If we are using the information that we have present in our head based upon our values, we have to have some amount of strength in order to actually follow through with the actions necessitated by those values that have selected the particular information that we are using or implementing within reality. That's kind of a complicated way of essentially saying that we have information in our head, we value that information, or we choose which of the information within our head to use at any particular moment. We are then going to make some kind of action off of it. So in this case, we could say that there is some information in my head about how to ride a bike, and then there is the process through which I select which of that information to use so that I can ride the bike, or which of the information I want to use or why I should ride a bike. And then there is the decision or the willingness that I have to actually ride that bike, to actually bring it into action. So let's talk about the first component, which is honesty. Honesty, in essence, is this idea of how real is the information that I have inside of my head. So we can describe honesty in this context, or from my model's perspective, as the predictiveness and the quantity of information that we have accessible to us at any particular moment in time when we're making a decision. How reliable is the information that I have to actually predict the outcomes of reality? In addition to that, how much information do I have to make predictions about reality? In the left diagram here, we can say that the rainbow line is the actual outcome of existence that's occurring. So let's say we're modeling the temperature of a room. We're gonna say that the actual temperature that is objectively existing, quote unquote, if that exists, or at least what we would measure if we had a perfect way of measuring the temperature in the room, is this rainbow line. The black line is our prediction or our expectation of what the temperature is based upon the information that we have inside of our head. So let's say the current moment that we are in is this moment right here, and we have to make some prediction about where the temperature is going in the next moment. The question is, how reliable is the information that I have to make that prediction? The more data that we have about how reality is operating in that context allows us to better predict the outcome. Let's again say that we are modeling the temperature in a room. We're going to say that this is the data set that we have in our head about the temperature in a room over some period of time. And we want to use this data to then predict, let's say, the outcome at a particular moment in time. We're going to be drawing some kind of function into our data as a way of defining what will probably end up happening within reality. We have a lot of information about the beginnings and the very ends of the temperature that the room is going to take. We feel like we have a 65% accurate prediction and a 35% precise prediction. We really don't have a lot of data in this middle section here. And so we'd say that our accuracy and precision of predicting the temperature within this time period is much lower. So we'd say probably like 25% accuracy and maybe like a 10% level of precision when we're predicting the temperature in the room at that moment. These two graphs are intimately related. The likelihood in this instance, when we're progressing moment to moment as we're trying to predict the temperature, is dependent on how much information we have about what we're trying to predict, in addition to how reliable that data is. Because let's say maybe this data is from when there was a heat wave, and so our prediction is going to be massively skewed because the data came from an unreliable source. And so the reason we call this trait honesty is because it kind of embodies this idea of questioning and really interrogating yourself about the information that you have. Asking yourself, do I have enough information about this particular thing or about this particular choice in order to make it in a way that I will get the things that I want out of the decision I'm making? The next category of information from this perspective is value. So essentially what value is in this context is a question of how useful is my information? Now, use in this context is incredibly ambiguous. What do we find meaningful, and why do we want to apply information in one way versus another way? In essence, it is the strategy and principles that I am using to select the information from the pool of information that I have accessible to me. What is my objective? What am I trying to do as I'm making any particular decision? So let's go over the example on the left. In this example, we are taking an algebra test. We are accessing information in our brain and then choosing which of those pieces of information to pick. So we are presented with the equation y equals 4x minus 5, and we are asked to solve for x. We have the information that we could subtract 5 from both sides, and we have the information that we could add 5 to both sides. And so the value is essentially why we make the decision to use whichever piece of information we end up using. So if our desire or our goal is to solve for x as described by the rules of algebra, then the value that we have has to lead us through this decision tree to the correct answer. So if we are incorrectly valuing the information that we have present in our head, we are going to end up making decisions that do not reflect our objectives or our purpose or what we're trying to get out of any particular decision. A very common philosophical question. We can imagine there's some trolley here. It's coming down the tracks. We can either not pull the lever, or we can pull the lever. We have information in our head about what is going to happen in each instance. In the instance of not pulling the lever, 3 cats will end up dying as a result of the trolley driving over them. But if we pull the lever, then only 1 cat will die as a result of the trolley driving over it, because we will switch which track the trolley is going to drive down. Now, obviously, there is no objective answer to the trolley problem. We have the information about the outcomes that are going to happen, and then we have some kind of objective. So let's say my objective is to reduce the number of cats that die. With my value system, I am going to select the information that is going to reduce the amount of cats that die, which would be that there is this lever that I can pull to reduce the number of cats that die. But we could also think my objective is to not act in a way that harms anyone else. And in this case, I cannot pull the lever because by pulling the lever, I am killing this cat here, and that goes against my objective of not killing or harming any living creatures. Okay, and finally, we come to strength. So strength, in essence, is a question of how usable is the information that I have selected to use. So it is the capability and the willingness to act on the information I have at any particular moment or range of time. From this perspective, we have some information in our head. We have selected which piece of information we are going to apply to reality for whatever reason we have. We have some kind of objective, and now we actually have to follow through with that. So we have to have a willingness to do that thing, in addition to the ability or the capability to actually do that thing. Am I able to do what needs to be done, and am I willing to do what needs to be done? So in the bottom left example here, let's say that my goal is to turn off the lamp. I have a bunch of information in my head about how I'm going to be turning off the lamp. I know that I can pull the string and that will turn off the lamp. I know that I have to walk through this door in order to turn off the lamp, yada, 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 right? I have a bunch of information that I'm then going to use my value system to apply to hopefully get some kind of action out based upon the goal that I have. So although my goal is to turn off the lamp and I have correctly valued the information of how I would go about walking through the door and then walking over to the lamp and pulling it, I now come into a situation where there's a spider on the knob of the door. And let's say I have arachnophobia. So although I have the information to be able to turn off the lamp, I'm actually frozen and unable to follow through with the action that my value is asking me to perform. So this is where willingness is our issue. So although I want to turn off the lamp and I have the information that allows me to turn off the lamp, I don't follow through with turning off the lamp because I'm not willing to touch the spider on the doorknob. So now let's talk about the capability to do something. Again, we are in the trolley problem. So we've got some trolley coming down the tracks here. We're going to kill 3 cats if we don't touch the lever, and we're going to kill 1 cat if we do touch the lever. So let's say we take the example that we have an objective of killing as few cats as possible. So in our head, we know that by pulling the lever, we are going to change which track the trolley goes on. And so we are valuing that information and we're going to make an action on it. So we pull the lever. But what we don't know, what we didn't have information of, is that the lever actually isn't going to change which track it's going on. And so although we valued and we desired and we used the information as best as we understood it, the capability of applying that information to get the outcome we desired was not present. And so these 3 cats die instead of the one that we desired to die. Not only do we need the willingness to do some action that we feel is required to get our objectives, we also have to exist in a reality or a situation where it's actually possible for me to perform the actions that I want to perform. Let's quickly go over what we talked about and then some acknowledgements about the system. We have some honesty about reality, which is the amount of information or data that we have about any particular thing we're trying to make a choice on, as well as the reliability of that data. And then from that information, we have to then have some meaning, purpose, or goal in mind in order to pick a particular piece of information from our pool of information. And then finally, we have to not only be willing to follow through with what that information and our value necessitates, we also have to be existing within the circumstances or within a reality that allows us to do the things that we're actually intending or trying to do. This system does not include any morality or normative sense into it. It is simply an analysis of, from our perspective, how we make decisions and how we can optimize them. In the next video, we're going to be touching on if we want to improve the outcome of particular choices that we're making, what we should prioritize first. So we should always be honest first, and then we should always seek to understand how we need to be valuing things based upon our honesty. And then we need to understand how we can be more strong or more capable of doing something.